My name is Chloe, and I grew up in the shadow of a star, my older sister Ava. Our house was always bustling with visitors. Aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it. They would swarm into our backyard like ants drawn to a picnic, eager for Diane's famous barbecue and the chance to see Ava perform. The backyard became like a stage, with its perfectly manicured lawn and the towering oak tree that served as a picturesque backdrop. Richard would light up the grill, the scent of sizzling meat and charcoal filling the air, while Diane flitted around making sure everyone had a drink in hand. "Ava, sweetie," Aunt Carol would call out, her voice rising above the din of conversation. "Why don't you give us a little song?" At that moment, all eyes would turn to my sister. Ava would leap onto a chair, her golden curls bouncing with every movement, her eyes sparkling mischievously. After a dramatic clearing of her throat, she would belt out, "My heart will go on," doing her best Celine Dion impression. The adults would go wild, clapping and cheering like they were at a concert. Diane and Richard would beam with pride, Richard even wiping away a tear. As for me, I'd be off to the side, trying to disappear among the bushes. It wasn't that I didn't want to join in, but whenever I tried to sing, it sounded like a cat being strangled. And poetry? Forget it. The words tangled on my tongue, leaving me stammering and red-faced. I overheard my relatives whispering about how different I was from Ava. It wasn't just the relatives. Diane and Richard made it abundantly clear who the family's shining star was. While Ava was carted off to dance classes, singing lessons, and art workshops, I was left to entertain myself. Not that I minded much. I found comfort in the dusty old books that lined our shelves. The only one who seemed to understand me was Great Aunt Bess. She'd find me hidden behind the garage or curled up in the treehouse with a book. "What adventure are you on today, Chloe?" she'd ask, sitting beside me. I'd look up, appreciating the break. "Just reading about ancient Egypt," I'd reply, showing her the cover of my latest book. Aunt Bess would smile, her eyes twinkling. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, girl. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those moments with Aunt Bess were like a soothing balm. She never expected me to perform or be anything other than myself. With her, I could simply be Chloe, the quiet, bookish girl who preferred the company of stories over the chaos of family celebrations. But as much as I treasured those moments, they couldn't dull the ache of being the overlooked child. Every time Ava mastered a new song or won another award, my parents would shower her with praise and gifts, new clothes, the latest gadgets, you name it. Ava got it all. As for me, I got hand-me-downs and frustrated sighs. School became my sanctuary. While I wasn't exactly Miss Popularity, I found my groove in the classroom. I wasn't content to just sit there and let the lessons wash over me. No, I was determined to understand every single thing the teachers said. "Ms. Evans," I'd say after class, my voice quiet but steady. "Could you explain that bit about mitosis again?" I didn't quite get it. She'd smile, obviously pleased by my interest. "Of course, Chloe. Why don't we go over it together?" If a teacher couldn't spare the time, I'd ask for book recommendations. Soon, my backpack was always bulging with extra reading material. I'd stay up late poring over those books, determined to master every subject. All that hard work paid off. By the time I hit high school, I was top of my class. For once in my life, I was the best at something. I even made a few friends, other bookworms who didn't mind my quiet ways. As graduation approached, our house became Ava Central. Diane was constantly helping her put together her portfolio for the advertising and PR program at some fancy college. "Oh, honey, this campaign idea is perfect," Diane would gush, looking at Ava's work. "You're so talented." I'd roll my eyes and retreat to my room, burying myself in my studies. But one night, during yet another family dinner devoted to Ava's college plans, something in me snapped. "I'm going to college too," I blurted out. "I want to study management." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, to my shock and hurt, they all burst out laughing. "Oh, sweetie," Diane said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "We don't have money for that. You'll need to get a job after graduation. You're just not as gifted as your sister." I felt like I'd been slapped. But I'm the top student in my class," I stammered, my face burning with anger and embarrassment. "I get straight A's." I stormed up to my room and came back with my report card, slamming it on the table. They all leaned in to look, their eyes widening in surprise. "Well, I'll be damned," Richard muttered, scratching his head. "When did this happen?" "It's been happening for years," I spat. "Not that any of you ever noticed." Diane at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Chloe, we had no idea." But Richard cut her off. "Look, it doesn't change anything. We've spent all our savings on Ava's education. There's nothing left for you, Chloe. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. You'll go to work at Uncle Joe's restaurant after graduation." I turned and ran, ignoring their calls. I sprinted up the stairs into my room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. As I collapsed onto my bed, sobs racking my body, I felt something inside me harden. "Fine," I thought, my hands clenching into fists. "If they won't help me, I'll find another way. I'll show them all what Chloe can do." The next few months were a blur. Ava headed off to college, her departure marked by tearful goodbyes and proud parental embraces. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor, determined to graduate at the top of my class. During this time, I found myself spending more and more time with Great Aunt Bess. Her small, cozy house became my refuge from the tension at home. One afternoon, as we sat in her sunlit kitchen sipping tea, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, Chloe," she said, her kind eyes fixed on me, "what are your plans after graduation?" I stared into my teacup, fighting back tears. I don't know, Aunt Bess. Diane and Richard won't help me with college. They say there's no money left after paying for Ava's education." Aunt Bess was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Chloe, dear, I've got some savings. I'd like to give them to you for college. You're smart as a whip, and I'll be damned if I let that brain of yours go to waste." The reality of her words hit me like a tidal wave. I burst into tears, overwhelmed by her generosity and the sudden realization that my dreams weren't dead after all. "Thank you," I sobbed, throwing my arms around her. "Thank you so much, Aunt Bess." The months passed quickly, and before I realized it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, my diploma clutched in hand. Scanning the crowd, I spotted Aunt Bess, her face lighting up with pride. My parents were there too, their expressions a mix of pride and discomfort. Later that evening, as I pored over college brochures, Diane walked in. "Chloe, honey," she said, her tone dripping with sweetness. "Your father's cousin, Uncle Joe, called. He has a job waiting for you at his restaurant. Isn't that exciting?" I took a steadying breath. "Actually, Diane, I won't need that job. I'm going to college." Richard appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "And how do you plan to pay for that?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "Aunt Bess is helping me," I replied, lifting my chin. "She's giving me her savings for tuition." The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. Then, to my astonishment, Richard's face turned red with fury. "Absolutely not," he roared. "If Bess has money to spare, it should go to Ava. She needs a car for her job in advertising after she graduates next year." I couldn't believe my ears. "Are you serious?" I shot back, my voice rising. "This is my chance to get an education, to make something of myself." "Don't be selfish, Chloe," Diane interjected. "Your sister needs that money more than you do." My hands clenched into fists. "No," I said, my voice quivering but resolute. "This is my money now, and I'm using it for college. End of discussion." From that moment on, life at home became unbearable. My parents either ignored me entirely or snapped at me for the slightest things. The tension in the house was suffocating. After one particularly heated argument, I called Aunt Bess, tears streaming down my face, and told her everything. "Pack your bags, sweetheart," she said without hesitation. "You're coming to live with me." The next day, I stuffed everything I owned into a cab and left, watching my childhood home grow smaller in the rearview mirror. When I arrived at Aunt Bess's house, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. The summer flew by in a flurry of preparations, and before I knew it, I was stepping onto the campus of State University. Thanks to my stellar grades and Aunt Bess's generosity, I'd been accepted into the management program I'd always dreamed of. On my first day of classes, I felt like I was floating. As I sat in my business lecture, soaking in every word, I couldn't help but think, I made it. I'm really here. Meanwhile, Ava was starting her senior year at her prestigious college. Since I moved out, I hadn't heard much from her or my parents, but I tried not to let it bother me. I was too caught up in the freedom and excitement of college life. Then, about a month into the semester, Aunt Bess called. "Chloe, dear," she said gently, "I think you should sit down for this." My heart skipped a beat as she shared the family drama I'd missed. Ava had unexpectedly returned home, announcing she'd dropped out of college because she was pregnant. According to Aunt Bess, Ava had been nonchalant about it. "Oh, don't worry," she had said, tossing her hair. "The baby's father is rich. We're getting married soon." But the story didn't end there. It turned out Ava's boyfriend wasn't as committed as she had thought. When he found out she'd been sleeping with his friend too, all hell broke loose. Now they didn't even know who the father was. Aunt Bess sighed deeply. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process it all. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction the golden child had fallen from her pedestal, but mostly, I just felt sadness for Ava and the mess she'd created. The saga continued over the next few months. Aunt Bess kept me updated on the gossip from the family gatherings I no longer attended. When Ava's baby was born, a DNA test confirmed that her boyfriend was indeed the father. But instead of the fairy tale wedding she had imagined, he simply agreed to pay child support. The final blow came when Ava, desperate for work, took a job as a waitress at Uncle Joe's restaurant, the same job my parents had once tried to push on me. As I hung up the phone, a storm of emotions flooded me. A small, petty part of me wanted to gloat, to flaunt my success in front of my family. But mostly, I just felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for where I was and how far I had come. The years flew by in a blur of lectures, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, my hard-earned management degree clutched tightly in my hand. As I scanned the crowd, I saw Aunt Bess beaming at me, tears of pride in her eyes. Thanks to my top grades and glowing recommendations from my professors, I landed a job as a manager at the Gilded Fork, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. The salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly successful. With my first paycheck, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I marched into the electronics store and bought the latest smartphone for Aunt Bess. Her face lit up when I presented it to her. "Oh, Chloe," she gasped, turning the sleek device over in her hands. "This is too much." I grinned, already pulling out my own phone. "Not at all. Now, let me show you how to use it." Over the next few weeks, I taught Aunt Bess the ins and outs of social media. She took to it like a duck to water, especially loving Facebook's video feature. Soon, her page was filled with clips of her garden, her cat, and her infamous apple pie in various stages of creation. I'd watch her videos during my lunch breaks, always making sure to leave a comment or a like. It was our way of staying connected, even when work kept me busy. One day, as I was preparing for the dinner rush, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, surprised to see my mother's name on the screen. We hadn't spoken in years. "Chloe," her voice was hesitant, "we were hoping you might come over to talk." After a long pause, I agreed. That Sunday, I found myself standing on the porch of my childhood home, my hand hovering over the doorbell. Before I could press it, the door swung open. "Chloe." My mother pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetie, it's so good to see you." Inside, I found my father, Ava, and a toddler I assumed was my niece. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile like I'd feared. "You look good, kiddo," Richard said, his voice gruff but warm. "We hear you're doing well for yourself." I nodded, still wary. "I am. I'm a manager at the Gilded Fork now." Their eyes widened at the name of the restaurant. Diane cleared her throat. That's wonderful, dear. Actually, that's part of why we wanted to talk to you." Over the next hour, they apologized for how they treated me, admitting they'd been wrong to dismiss my potential. Then came the real reason for the reunion. "Chloe," Diane said, glancing at Ava, we were wondering if you might be able to help Ava get a job at your restaurant." I looked at my sister, bouncing her daughter on her knee. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'll see what I can do," I said finally. "No promises, but I'll ask." True to my word, I spoke to Mr. Sterling, the restaurant owner, about Ava. To my surprise, he agreed to give her a shot as an administrator. Ava started the following week. I watched her closely, half expecting her to fail or cause drama. But to my shock, she excelled. She was punctual, efficient, and the customers loved her charm. As the weeks passed, I found myself relaxing around her. We weren't best friends by any means, but we developed a cordial working relationship. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, the universe decided to throw me another curveball, this time a positive one. Mr. Sterling called me into his office one day. My heart raced, wondering if I'd done something wrong. Instead, he grinned at me and said, "Chloe, how would you like to help me expand the business?" Before I knew it, I was overseeing the opening of not one but 3 new restaurants. My days became a whirlwind of staff meetings, menu tastings, and number crunching. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and everything I'd ever dreamed of. The promotion came with a significant pay bump, and suddenly I found myself with more money than I knew what to do with. That's when the calls from my parents started. At first, it was just small things. "The roof is leaking," Diane would say, her voice hesitant. "We were wondering if you might be able to help out a little." I was surprised at how good it felt to say yes, to be able to solve their problems with a simple transfer of funds. It started with the roof, then it was a new water heater, and before long I was funding a complete home renovation. As their financial situation improved, thanks to my monthly allowance, the infamous family parties started up again. But this time, when I attended, things were different. "Have you heard about Chloe's latest project?" Diane would gush to the relatives. "She's opening a new restaurant downtown. We're so proud of her." I'd catch Ava's eye across the room, and she'd give me a small smile. She was doing well too, having been promoted to head administrator at the Gilded Fork. "My girls," Richard would say, an arm around each of us, both of them making their old man proud. Part of me wanted to be bitter, to remind them of how they treated me before. But a larger part reveled in the warmth of their approval, something I'd craved for so long. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. Finally, after all these years, I had what I'd always wanted: success in my career, and the love and appreciation of my family. I was the golden child now. But better than that, I was my own woman, standing on my own 2 feet. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind where time seems to stand still. I was scrolling through Facebook, sipping my coffee, when I noticed a new video posted by Aunt Bess. It was from one of the family gatherings I'd missed due to work commitments. Smiling, I clicked play, expecting the usual scenes of laughter and lightheartedness. What I saw instead made my stomach drop. There, in full color, were my parents, their faces flushed with alcohol and self-righteousness. Diane was waving her hands around wildly, her words slurred but unmistakable. "And Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "That ungrateful little freeloader, she barely gives us anything. We're not made of money, you know." Richard, his face as red as a beet, added, "That's right. We're doing just fine thanks to Ava. She's the one keeping that fancy restaurant afloat." Chloe just rides on her coattails. The video went on, various relatives chiming in with their own criticisms, some nodding along, others throwing in their 2 cents. Ava sat in the corner, looking awkward but not saying a word to defend me. As the video ended, I sat frozen, the blood draining from my face. How could they? After everything I'd done for them, after all the money and support I had given them, how could they say such terrible, false things? With shaking hands, I scrolled down to the comments. There, in black and white, were messages from my parents. Bess, delete this video right now. You had no right to post this. Take it down immediately. But Aunt Bess's reply was a slap in the face. I don't know how to delete videos, and even if I did, I wouldn't. It's time everyone saw the truth about how you treat Chloe. She's the one supporting you, and this is how you repay her kindness. Shame on you both. I sat there, staring at the screen, for what felt like hours. The betrayal stung more than anything I'd ever experienced. It opened old wounds that I thought had healed long ago. Slowly, I picked up my phone and dialed Aunt Bess's number. "Oh, Chloe, dear," she said when she answered, her voice full of empathy. "I take it you've seen the video?" "Yeah," I managed to choke out, my voice cracking with emotion. "I can't believe it, Aunt Bess. How could they?" I could hear the anger in her voice as she responded, "They've always been like this, Chloe. You just haven't been around to see it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but maybe it's for the best. You deserve to know the truth." We talked for hours, Aunt Bess comforting me as I cycled through shock, anger, and grief. When the night finally settled, I made a decision. "I'm cutting them off," I said, my voice steady but filled with pain. "No more money, no more help. They made their bed. Now they can lie in it." The days after the video came to light were some of the toughest of my life. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Their words, cruel and false, played over and over in my mind like a broken record. After a week of silence, I finally sent them a brief, emotionless text. "I've seen the video. I know what you really think of me. Don't contact me again. The money stops now." Their responses were swift. At first, they were full of apologies. "Chloe, sweetie, we're so sorry. We didn't mean any of it. Please forgive us." But as the days passed and I refused to respond, their tone shifted. "We're your parents. You owe us." Each message stung like a fresh wound, but I remained firm. I had given them every opportunity to change, but they had only thrown it back in my face. It was time to break free from the cycle. To my surprise, Ava stayed out of it. At work, she was the model employee, efficient and professional. If she felt any bitterness over losing our parents' financial support, she didn't show it. Our interactions were polite but distant. "I'm not taking sides," she told me one day after a staff meeting. "It's between you and them." I nodded, grateful for her neutrality, even though part of me wished she would stand up for me. But I understood. She had her own child to think about now. As weeks turned into months, I leaned more and more on Aunt Bess. Our Sunday video calls became the highlight of my week. She would share stories from her garden or talk about her latest baking projects, providing a much-needed sense of normalcy amidst the chaos of my life. "You're doing the right thing, Chloe," she would remind me when doubt crept in. "Don't let them manipulate you anymore." To my surprise, other relatives started reaching out too. Cousin Emily, who had always been kind to me during family gatherings, sent a heartfelt email. "I saw the video. I want you to know I think you're amazing, Chloe. What you've achieved, how you've helped everyone, you're an inspiration. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Uncle Mark, Richard's brother, called me unexpectedly. "Kid, I've watched you grow up, and you've become this incredible woman. Your parents are fools if they can't see how special you are. You've got family in your corner, remember that." These messages of support were like healing balm to my wounded heart. I realized that while I might have lost my parents, I had gained a family who truly appreciated me for who I was. As the year came to a close, Mr. Sterling called me into his office. I walked in nervous, unsure if the family drama had affected my work, but instead of concern, he greeted me with a broad smile. "Chloe, I'm retiring next year. I want you to take over as CEO of the restaurant group." I stood frozen, completely stunned. "Are you sure?" I finally managed to ask. He nodded, his eyes sparkling with certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You've earned this, Chloe. You're the reason this business has flourished. It's time you took the reins." As I left his office, my head spinning with possibilities, I realized something profound. The little girl who had been overlooked and underestimated had grown into a woman who had surpassed everyone's expectations, including her own.